Greetings. This is iVideo. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. And today we'll continue our series on World War II, the camps. We hope to conclude with this particular episode. As you know, many of you, iVideo is a program which looks at history broadly speaking. We may look at martial arts, or we may look at economy, religion, archaeology, and so forth, biology, sports. But at any rate, we do try to approach such things with an eye to bringing information not generally found in the educational establishment, private or public, or the great newspapers, the powerful, rich papers of the establishment, nor their book publishing companies, nor the print groups, generally speaking. We feel that a serious omission has occurred in the educational process, in the information process, because of the lack of information in these areas, and we consider this an educational effort to sort of broaden, deepen, round out the viewers' information in these particular areas touched upon. On July 17, 1919, the Washington Times reprinted an article from the respected London Daily Telegraph that read, in part, "Poland has cut its estimate of the number of people killed by the Nazis in the Auschwitz death camp from 4 million to just over 1 million. The new study could rekindle controversy over the scale of Hitler's final solution." Also, Samuel Krakowski, head of research at Israel's Yad Vashem Memorial for Jewish Victims of the Holocaust, said the new Polish figures were correct. Furthermore, French Holocaust researcher Jean-Claude Prasik, in his book Les Crématoires d'Auschwitz, la machinerie de meurtre de masse, scaled the figure down even further. He estimated in total that about 775,000 died at Auschwitz. This is a citation from the Facts and the Myths about the Holocaust, pages 3 and 4. And Auschwitz, the Final Count, examines the new reports in the mainstream media and provides essential additional facts that must be considered in order for the full story of Auschwitz to finally be told. The book features a fascinating introduction by Bird exploring the little-known but thoroughly documented phenomenon in which the numbers of the official Auschwitz death toll have plummeted from a high of 9 million dead to a rock bottom of 73,137, of whom 38,031 were Jews. And readers will note that of the 26 widely varying figures cited by Bird, all come from a variety of responsible and mainstream sources. No figure Bird cites comes from any source accused of denying the Holocaust, whatever that means. Clearly, the number of people who died at Auschwitz is central to understanding what did happen there, but the figures keep changing. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, September-October 1999, pages 60-61. Please consider. Secretary of State Madeleine K. Albright, her spokesman James P. Rubin, said in an interview yesterday, routinely encourages world leaders to visit the memorial, but with regard to Chairman Arafat, it is particularly important that he visit because the horrors of the Holocaust were a defining event in Jewish history. This is a citation from the Washington Post, Saturday, January 17, 1998, page A13. The American Hebrew, October 31, 1919. The Crucifixion of Jews Must Stop, by Martin H. Glenn, former governor of the state of New York. From across the sea, 6 million men and women call to us for help, and 800,000 little children cry for bread. These children, these men and women, are our fellow members of the human family with the same claim on life as we, the same susceptibility to the winter's cold, the same propensity to death before the fangs of hunger. Within them reside the illimitable possibilities for the advancement of the human race as naturally would reside in 6 million human beings. We may not be their keepers, but we ought to be their helpers. In the face of death, in the throes of starvation, there is no place for mental distinctions of creed, no place for physical differentiations of race. In this catastrophe, when 6 million human beings are being whirled toward the grave by a cruel and relentless fate, only the most idealistic promptings of human nature should sway the heart and move the hand. 6 million men and women are dying from lack of the necessaries of life. 800,000 children cry for bread, and this fate is upon them through no fault of their own, through no transgression of the laws of God or man, but through the awful tyranny of war and a bigoted lust for Jewish blood. In this threatened holocaust of human life, forgotten are the niceties of philosophical distinction, forgotten are the This is a citation from The Truth at Last, issue number 391, page 16, citing an article in the American Hebrew of October 31, 1919, entitled "The Crucifixion of Jews Must Stop," by Martin H. Glenn, former governor of the state of New York. Every Jew, somewhere in his being, should set apart a zone of hate, healthy, virile hate, for what the German personifies and for what persists in the German. God's Covenant People, chapter 6, page 140, citing Elie Wiesel, Legends of Our Time, 1968, page 142. Because there was no evident intent to exterminate them, for various reasons, mainly because of security risk, Jews were concentrated in assembly camps and subsequently deported to ghettos or work camps where they were often forced to work under inhuman conditions. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, Volume 4, Number 4, July-August 1998, page 9. Well, parenthetically, I will note that the Hitler regime confiscated handguns and I think rifles and so forth, making it very difficult for anyone to defend themselves against the totalitarian force represented by the Nazi regime. That is, in my mind, a pretty good argument for keeping a citizenry armed to protect the nation. The truth about Auschwitz is that it was the largest and most important industrial concentration camp, producing all kinds of material for the war industry. The camp consisted of synthetic coal and rubber plants built by IG Farben Industry, for whom the prisoners supplied labor. Auschwitz also comprised an agricultural research station with laboratories, plant nurseries, and facilities for stock breeding, as well as Krupp's armament works. We have already remarked that this kind of activity was a prime function of the camps. All major firms had subsidiaries in them, and the SS even opened their own factories. And in terms of numbers, Polish Jewry is supposed to have suffered most of all from extermination, not only at Auschwitz, but at an endless list of newly discovered death camps, such as Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Majdanek, Chelmno, and many more obscure places which seem suddenly to have gained prominence. The case of the Warsaw Ghetto is an instructive insight into the creation of the extermination legend itself. Indeed, its evacuation by the Germans in 1943 is often referred to as the extermination of the Polish Jews, although it was nothing of the kind. When the Germans first occupied Poland, they confined the Jews not in detention camps, but in ghettos for reasons of security. The interior administration of the ghettos was in the hands of Jewish councils elected by themselves, and they were policed by an independent Jewish police force. Whether this system was right or wrong, it was understandable in time of war. And although the ghetto is perhaps an unpleasant social establishment, it is by no means barbaric. And it is certainly not an organization for the destruction of a race. In reality, of the 1 million or so Jews in Poland, almost half, about 400,000, were eventually concentrated in the ghetto of Warsaw, an area of about 2.5 square miles. The remainder had already been moved to the Polish government general by September 1940. In the summer of 1942, Himmler ordered the resettlement of all Polish Jews in detention camps in order to obtain their labor, part of the system of general concentration for labor assignment in the government general. Thus, between July and October 1942, over 3/4 of the Warsaw Ghetto's inhabitants were peacefully evacuated and transported, supervised by the Jewish police themselves. After 6 months of peaceful evacuation, when only about 60,000 Jews remained in the residential ghetto, the Germans met with an armed rebellion on 18 January 1943. The terrorists in the ghetto uprisings were also assisted by the Polish Home Army and the PPR, Communist Polish Workers' Party. It was under these circumstances of a revolt, aided by partisans and communists, that the occupying forces moved in to suppress the terrorists. The Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, in figures prepared by them for the Nuremberg trials, stated that in 1945 there were only 80,000 Jews remaining in Poland. In the American Jewish Yearbook 1948-1949, it was placed at 390,000, quite an advance on the original 80,000. Now, many of you may have difficulty in accepting these things. The idea of duplicity or worse on the part of Jewry just does not seem to ring any bells. Many have friends who are Jews, and it just does not seem to accord at all with them, and so forth. And to this I can only say that the facts seem to be what they are. And as for the feelings, well, I can only recall the words of the Jewish historian Hannah Arendt on the banality of evil. But be that as it may, it does seem to be properly based. All the World War II myths and propaganda notwithstanding, there is one fact that cannot be denied. During the war, the Nazi authorities permitted the International Red Cross to visit the concentration camps and supply food relief and other assistance to those very Jewish internees that, or so history tells us, the Nazis were determined to exterminate. A report issued by the Red Cross after the war reported that as many as 9,000 parcels were packed daily. From the autumn of 1943 until May 1945, about 1,112,000 parcels with a total weight of 4,500 tons were sent off to the concentration camps. The Red Cross was in a position to transfer and distribute in the form of relief supplies over 20 million Swiss francs collected by Jewish welfare organizations throughout the world, in particular by the American Joint Distribution Committee of New York. It might upset some to know, additionally, that the Red Cross complained that it was the Allied blockade of Europe that was largely responsible for obstructing the Red Cross relief efforts. The Red Cross turned to Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia for food purchases, not Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. This is a citation from the Facts and the Myths about the Holocaust, page 8. Also, an IKRK, that is International Red Cross, delegation visited Auschwitz in September 1944. Their report stated that, among other things, the inmates were allowed to receive food parcels and that the IKRK had followed up rumors about gas chambers but had not found any. The IKRK maintains an international tracing service in Erelson where all reports about former inmates are collected and where death certificates are issued if the relatives so desire. As of December 31, 1983, the entire number of registered deaths in all German concentration camps was 373,486. Understandably, these figures are incomplete because many people also died outside the camps. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, Volume 4, Number 4, July-August 1998, page 9. Now, people, the vaunted German love of detail and efficiency must have left some sort of clue, some paper trail, which would give us enlightenment as to what was going on. Well, let's consider this. When inmates died at the Auschwitz concentration camp, the German authorities recorded each of those deaths on certificates that were then bound together in death registry volumes. The certificates not only included the person's name, profession, religion, date and place of birth, home address prior to resettlement at Auschwitz, parents' names, but also the time and cause of death. The Soviet forces that captured Auschwitz took these death books into custody, and they were held in the Soviet archives in the Kremlin in Moscow. However, in 1989, these volumes were released to scholars. There are some 46 volumes, partially covering the years 1941, 1942, and 1943. Volumes for the entire years of 1944 and 1945 are missing. Their location is unknown at this time. What is most intriguing about these documents is that the volumes that are available record the deaths of 69,000 Auschwitz inmates. Included among those deaths are not only those who died of natural causes, but also inmates who were executed for criminal activity during incarceration. Many of the deaths recorded were those of elderly individuals who were clearly too ill to work in the labor camps being run by the German authorities. Yet we have been repeatedly told that Auschwitz was nothing more than a murder factory, where the sick and infirm, not to mention the healthy and able, were peremptorily sent to the gas chambers upon arrival. This is a citation from the Facts and the Myths about the Holocaust, page 16. Now, people, in point of fact, the treatment of the inmates in these particular concentration camp facilities was not entirely dreadful. Please consider. On December 28, 1942, the head of the SS concentration camp administrative office sent a directive to Auschwitz and other camps criticizing the high death rate among prisoners due to disease. This directive was part of the exhibits at the Nuremberg war crimes trials. It was Nuremberg document PS 2171, Annex 2, A in red series, Volume 4, pages 833-834. The directive ordered that camp physicians must use all means at their disposal to significantly reduce the death rate in the various camps, and that the camp doctors are to see to it that the working conditions at the various labor places are improved as much as possible. The order noted that SS Chief Heinrich Himmler has ordered that the death rate absolutely must be reduced. This is a citation from the Facts and the Myths about the Holocaust, page 11. The slander of these German officers and the execution of many of them is a stain upon the honor of America, which must be rectified by getting to the bottom and honestly stating what happened, and to once and for all resolve this thing in an honorable way. We cannot have deceit as our modus vivendi, the acme of American culture. We have to do better. But please consider. However, one Holocaust survivor, Mark Klein, a professor in the medical school at the University of Strasbourg, who was an inmate at Auschwitz, revealed this. On Sunday afternoon, there were soccer, basketball, and water polo matches to the ardent cheers of the spectators. People needed very little to distract them from the dangers that threatened them. The SS administration allowed regular amusements for the prisoners, even on weekdays. A movie theater showed Nazi newsreels and sentimental films, and a very popular cabaret gave presentations, often attended by the SS authorities. Finally, there was a very creditable orchestra, made up originally only of Polish musicians, and replaced later by a new, high-quality group made up of musicians of all nationalities, mostly Jews. This is a citation from the Facts and the Myths about the Holocaust, page 10. Additionally, please consider, some creative Holocaust historians have contended that if the Nazis did not deliberately gas many Jews or kill them through other clever means, that they certainly did deliberately starve them to death. However, Dr. Russell Barton, who spent 1 month at the Belsen camp as a medical student after the war, reported that I was surprised to find records at the camp going back for 2 or 3 years of large quantities of food cooked daily for distribution. At that time, I became convinced, contrary to popular opinion, that there had never been a policy of deliberate starvation. This was confirmed by the large numbers of well-fed inmates. Why were so many people suffering from malnutrition? Reported Barton. The major reasons were disease, gross overcrowding by central authority, a lack of law and order within the huts, and inadequate supplies of food, water, and drugs. And this, according to Barton, only happened during the final months of the war, when Allied bombing shut off supplies to the concentration camps. So it is then that it may just have been the Allies who were responsible for many of those stacks of dead bodies discovered upon the liberation of the camps. And continuing a little bit further in the same vein on this preposterous story, consider. In the June 14, 1959 issue of Our Sunday Visitor, Stephen F. Pinter revealed the following. I was in Dachau for 17 months after the war as a U.S. War Department attorney and can state that there was no gas chamber at Dachau. What was shown to visitors and sightseers there and erroneously described as a gas chamber was a crematory. Nor was there a gas chamber in any of the other concentration camps in Germany. We were told that there was a gas chamber at Auschwitz, but since that was in the Russian zone of occupation, we were not permitted to investigate since the Russians would not allow it. From what I was able to determine during 6 post-war years in Germany and Austria, there were a number of Jews killed, but the figure of 1 million was certainly never reached. I interviewed thousands of Jews, former inmates of concentration camps in Germany and Austria, and consider myself as well qualified as any man on this subject. Now, this is a citation from the Facts and the Myths about the Holocaust, page 14. Well, that's it. That's all she wrote. We're out of time. This is iVideo. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. I appreciate your tuning in. Hope to see you again next time.